Hi, welcome to Welcoming Refugees Through Community Sponsorship. I am Jessica Cirone from the International Institute of New England. I'm the Director of Community Engagement, and I'm very happy you've joined us today. We are going to talk about our new co-sponsorship program, Resettle Together, how we developed it and planned for it, and the best practices and some takeaways for you today. First, just want to give you a little bit of an orientation to IINE's mission. We create opportunities for refugees and immigrants to succeed through resettlement, education, career advancement, and pathways to citizenship. Our vision is that all refugees and immigrants will be able to realize their dreams and contribute to New England's growth and prosperity. Today, our goals for this presentation are to learn a little bit about IINE, our mission, history, and theory of change, to understand what community sponsorship is, why we implemented, and the different forms it can take, to talk a little bit about the program planning, design, and implementation, our build-up, and our challenges, and some key takeaways that you could consider while building your own programs. So first, I'll talk just shortly about the history of the International Institute. It started at International Institute of Lowell, IIL, which was founded in 1918 as part of the YWCA. Then the International Institute of Boston, which was called IIB, was founded in 1924. We're celebrating our centennial next year. We're very excited. And in 1994, IIB merged with another agency serving immigrants in Manchester. In 2001, IIB merged with IIL. And then finally in 2016, the name was legally changed to IINE, the International Institute of Our theory of change, as you can see here detailed, is to resettle and welcome refugees to our communities and to offer them basic services to quickly feel that they are now part of our community and our cities. We provide educations for them through English language classes and financial literacy, as well as some skills training in our career advancement. Our initial employment pieces, we help them get their first or their second job in the US, and then we help them connect with skills trainings to continue to build their career path. And then we do our civic engagement, which is through our legal services. We help them with adjustment of statuses, and we help them go on to get their citizenship if they can. The outcome is that we are hoping to help our immigrants and refugees in our services become self-sufficient and thrive in the communities in New England. Now on to community sponsorship. So you may have heard this term be used around recently in the news. Generally, community sponsorship is an effort between groups of people that work together to prepare and welcome refugees into our communities. It does have different forms, and I'll just go over very basically the two different forms that it has. So here at the top of this chart, you can see it's community sponsorship. On the right-hand side, there's community-led, which includes sponsor circles, which also includes Unite for Ukraine, and private sponsorship in the form of the newly created Biden administration program called Welcome Corps. The community-led groups are given some training by nonprofits and other community-based organizations that help them learn how to provide and refer the refugees they're sponsoring to basic services. They are responsible for providing financial support for these folks, as well as ensuring that they are connecting with the right agencies. Resettlement agency-led sponsorship is very similar to what I just described, and the difference is that it is in partnership with a resettlement agency, such as the International Institute of New England. There are 9 national resettlement agencies that have affiliates throughout the United States. We are one of them, and we form a partnership with the sponsor groups who are then providing the core services, and they are fundraising. However, we are also providing financial assistance. So it's more of a collaborative effort between groups of people in an agency than it is kind of taking these initiatives on your own. We have 2 forms, or there are 2 forms under resettlement agency-led. One of them is a co-sponsor, which I'm going to talk mostly about today. And then there's support or welcome teams, which are a little bit less structured, but offer the same services. So these are some resettlement and volunteer models that we'll go over just quickly. So in previous models, as I mentioned, there's the welcome home or welcome teams that help support various services such as apartment setups and airport pickups for families or multiple families. These could be large groups of people that got information from IINE that someone was arriving, and they came a week beforehand to make the apartment as much a home as they could. They were there for airport pickup, providing clothes and coats and sometimes stuffed animals for families that were arriving. And then this moved into family support teams, which took those basic services provided a step further. So they really helped maybe more with basic integration into the community, and they were really with one family instead of a few families, or kind of ongoing. It was really focused on one family. And then that moved into our new model, which was Resettle Together, which is a co-sponsorship model that is formally sponsoring a family, and it has a structured partnership that includes training and support for the sponsors. And you can also see here that that is very similar to the federal programs I mentioned earlier that do very similar things, but they are doing it on their own and not in collaboration with the resettlement agency. Although resettlement agencies do support the clients that that Welcome Corps and Unite for Ukraine and Sponsor Circles are working with. Some benefits of community sponsorship programs. They play vital roles really in the integration of newcomers, and they really show how we can welcome folks into our communities, which I think right now is so necessary across the US. I think of it as three stakeholders that are benefiting from this. One, of course, refugees themselves, who are getting introductions and connections to people in their community. I always cite the fact that I have small children. I would never know where free soccer cleats are, or the best parks or library services without, or I would find it challenging if I didn't have my network. And this is an opportunity for sponsors to be that network for families. They also help support their navigation of systems, school systems, transportation in terms of public transportation, social service agencies, all in their community. And that could be food banks or clothing drives, and connecting and being able to find and instruct where to find those services. And then also that relationship moves into friendship, into neighboring, and continues support and encouragement for both sides, both sponsors and refugees. The community, it gives you a new perspective. I think being able to see your city or your community through the eyes of someone who's brand new is, it is just such a wonderful opportunity to take a new perspective at your community. And we often get asked, how can I have more direct contact with the clients that IINE is serving? And this is as direct as it gets. You're helping resettle someone into a community. And then, as I mentioned, it provides significant support to the resettlement staff. Resettlement staff is working tirelessly on behalf of their clients. Case specialists work with up to 30 cases on their caseloads, and they do so many things for these folks. However, having a sponsor group attached to a family kind of takes some of that work and does it in collaboration with the staff. And so they are able to, the sponsors can kind of go above and beyond, and they can take the time to walk through a grocery store and point out organic versus non-organic, or what sales mean and sales tax, and all of the things that really take time. And having a sponsor group be able to do that really helps the staff significantly. So this is the portion we're talking about, our planning of our project. So despite the fact that we had expanded case management and volunteer staffing, IINE and lots of other agencies have realized that we cannot continue to support the demand for refugees that are arriving in large numbers into New England communities using the current funding and staffing model. So we started to think about, based on the success of the welcome teams that we mentioned before, where many, many people came together during the arrival of Afghans starting in the late summer of 2021. And we saw how many people wanted to help and how helpful it was to both the clients that were of IINE that were arriving and to the staff. So we said, okay, we know this is happening across the US. I have been fortunate to be part of other programs that were developing technical assistance and working on how those programs can best be built, including Church World Service and Community Sponsorship Hub, and was able to take that experience and apply it to the International Institute to start to plan these programs. So we received 2 small private grants to fund a pilot program to launch. The launch was October 22. I came in in May of 2022 to start building the program to launch officially in October. We had completed our initial project objectives in the summer of 2022, which was to hire a program manager. and to evaluate and adopt best practices. So that involved reaching out to those national organizations doing this work to get some technical assistance and to talk with folks who've been on the ground doing it, as well as to work very closely with organizations in New England who've been doing this work to hear what their thoughts, what the challenges they had, how they would do it differently if they had the time to build it up, which we did. And from there, we completed a 3-year program strategy, which we're already kind of going back and tweaking based on our learnings and our takeaways from this year. And then we started to implement the program, and we decided we would start with 10 teams that would pair with families in year 1. That was our goal. So we would have 10 sponsor groups that would pair with 10 cases, families or individuals. We listened very, very closely to the feedback from the previous welcome teams and to staff that happened during those Afghan arrivals. IINE had so many people that came out and helped and did all of this work, and it would be such a disadvantage to us to not talk to them and hear their input. So these are the kind of 4 points that we really heard from everyone, was that large groups of volunteers were very hard to oversee. Some of these groups were up to 40 people, which is amazing that they came together to generously offer their services, but also was very difficult for communication for everyone involved. That the sponsors didn't really receive the training or support that was needed. This work is done by experts at IINE and across the country, and volunteers are so wonderful to offer their support, but they also need some training and they need support while they're doing this work. There's no centralized communication, so now we have one point person, myself or someone on my team, can be the point of communication for the sponsors, so they don't have to be tracking down other people, and the other people don't have to be fielding calls from sponsors when they have so much other work to do. So we have one person to streamline that. And then the clients weren't really clear on the difference between IINE staff and the volunteers or sponsors. So that's something that we've created a one-pager that we give to clients to say, this is a sponsor group, and they get to opt in to say, yes, I am very excited to have this, which everyone has done. But it also just clearly explains the difference and what they would be doing, and that these folks might be in their house, and is that okay with them? So that was another part that we implemented in our planning. So then we went into create kind of our logic model. So our first 90 days activities, we created a logic model, a timeline that we could refer back to and clearly use to explain to staff and others what we were doing, including our funders. The first thing we did was roll out to staff to understanding and buy-in. This was essential. As I mentioned, with the welcome teams, the staff was sometimes overwhelmed with the number of questions that they were getting. And so there were some folks that had not a great feeling about launching a whole new program around this. So we listened to what they thought would be helpful. We started with the leadership, their managers, and then direct service staff to really get their input on what they would do and come up and follow up with them as the program went to say, is this working? Is this not working? We helped them. We asked for their help in developing the trainings, since they were the ones who'd been asked the questions. And then we explained the impact that we thought we would see, and we used examples from successful programs, especially in Canada and other US programs, to kind of demonstrate what we thought would be the success, and the creating surveys that we would give them at the end of the year to see if we were successful. We created a recruitment strategy, which has been revised many times over, but we did create the strategy. And what we came up with that has continued is weekly information sessions on Resettle Together to give people the opportunity to come and hear what we're doing. We've recorded them and been able to distribute them. We started with those two every week, and then we have now gone down to one every other week. At the beginning, we saw between 10 to 20 people attending them, and then it went down to 1 to 4, and then now it's back up to 15. So it really ebbs and flows depending on, kind of the interest, the season, what's going on. We did start our recruitment strategy in the summer, and I'm sure you all know that that's not an ideal time to be recruiting volunteers. So really didn't get engaged with them until fall. We did community mapping. We use a community mapping tool to outreach to local faith communities and civic groups and universities in Manchester and Lowell and in the Boston area. That was able for us to kind of organize our outreach. We worked with our IT team to set up fundraising tools, data entries, and impact measures that would clear, and we could set up while we were in the planning phase and the design phase. So we weren't doing it and building the ship while flying, which is what often happens. We were really able to take the time to design this program, which I was very grateful for to IINE. And then we wanted to utilize our internal databases, Apricot and Salesforce. One of the things that we created with our fundraising tools was to be a light lift as possible for the sponsors that were raising this money. And I'll talk a little bit about what that looks like in a moment. We met with the finance team to develop a budgeting plan, which I heard from so many leaders in this field that had not been done when they first started their program, and was really difficult when they then started to have money from sponsors and they weren't sure how they were going to code it and categorize it. And so we tried to set that up ahead of time so we wouldn't run into that. We still had some glitches, but we did have most of it set up. And then, as I said, we collaborated with organizations in both states, in New Hampshire and Massachusetts, that were doing this work to share practices and challenges. We came up with these goals. Our first goal was to strengthen community support of refugee resettlement in New England by engaging volunteers. 2, to increase the capacity of IINE to resettle refugees, and then to help the refugees feel supported, integrated, and welcomed more deeply and more quickly. We're still working on how to quantitatively measure that impact. We have the qualitative pieces. The quantitative is something I think people are struggling with across the different programs in the US. And so working together to figure out how we can best measure that. Then we came out of this with our initial program plan. So the overview was community sponsors would be matched with one family or an individual or group of individuals and commit to provide core services. It would form a group between 5 to 12 people, and they would designate a leader, could be 2 leaders, complete applications and background checks, which all of our volunteers do. We came up with a template of an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, which is a contract that we really took a lot of time to create, and we have edited and changed depending on what the group's impact or input was. So it's really what it is it's a clear list of IINE's roles, the sponsor group roles. It has different strategies for how we react if a refugee family moves after they've fundraised, what happens at the 3-month mark, the 6-month mark. We tried to put as much information as we could so that we could answer those questions ahead of time before the family arrives. And the feedback has been great that we have been able to kind of be flexible in this pilot program and change things and tweak contracts as we go. It's not a one-size-fits-all program. We ask all sponsors to complete specific training modules, including the Refugee Welcome Collective Baseline Training, which is external training that was developed by Church World Service and Refugee Welcome Collective. It's an incredibly useful tool. We've had great feedback from our sponsors who completed it. It's self-paced. It's about 3 hours, and it really takes some of the lift off of us and gives sponsors this really incredible tool to be able to use before they're coming back to meet with us. And then when they meet with us, they have general trainings that everyone in the group needs to go through, which includes communication, boundaries, expectation management, and self-care. And then there's different core service area trainings for individual members. We really wanted members to take on, we recommend they each take on a certain area, and then that way not everyone has to do all of the trainings, but someone's focused on housing, they do the housing training. Somebody's focused on education, they can do the education training. That's been very helpful. And then we created a Google Drive that has all of the trainings there available at all times and recorded trainings for people to see and use. And then we have individual folders for each group to go in and for their specific families with not putting names or private information, but it's more for resources and tools and trainings. We ask each group to fundraise a minimum of $10,000 per family. We are putting a cap of $15,000 on that because what we saw in other groups was some people would raise $30,000 and some would raise $5,000, and we wanted to create an equitable program. So we tried to put a cap. Of course, that cap has already had an exception for a family of 9. We asked people to commit to 9 to 12 months, depending on the family size, the ability of the sponsor group, and then to give us input and feedback on the program as we're developing. So here on this slide, you see the example of activities that people can engage in. This is a list and an example. It is not everything has to be done, because sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming for sponsors to look at this and think, oh my gosh, this is to do all of these things. So the asterisks are things that are done in partnership and collaboration with staff. Some of other things would be done in collaboration as well, depending on the size of the family and the English language level. But these are just examples. So pre-arrival, we are asking sponsors to help us locate appropriate housing, setting up apartments with furnishing and supplies, preparing welcome meals, and then, going to the airport to pick up and transport, which may be in collaboration with staff, but you get to come there and welcome a new family the first time they have come to your community. You can bring them coats if it's in the winter, stuffed animals for kids. It's always really a wonderful time to be together and welcome them. And then post-arrival to 90 days, they assist and support our cultural orientation curriculum. They go to the home and visit. They help with school enrollment, transportation to the many appointments refugees have in their first few months in the US. They support the conversation practice and the SOL, and they support job development by just practicing mock interviews, going over resumes. We have career services department that does all of our job search and job readiness, but they support that with this. And then post 90 days, it really depends on which area families might need support. We have a family of 4, for example, that really had a high level of English and extensive work experience, and they didn't need a lot of support after 4 months. And then again, we have a family of 9 that really will need it for up to 12 months. So those are conversations we have with the clients and with the staff and the sponsors. But what they may continue support with is ongoing career planning, English language learner, driver's license acquisition, enrolling in higher education, budgeting and financial literacy, and then ongoing neighboring and friendship. Some challenges we've had. So recruitment has been our biggest challenge. It was much more difficult to recruit sponsors than anticipated. This has been the feedback from people doing this work across the country. Some of it we think may have been that there was so much generosity and welcoming when the Afghans arrived, and then again with some Ukrainians, that there's just some fatigue. You know, there's only so much that everyone can do, and some people weren't happy with the way that they were supported. They felt burned out, and some of them are still supporting families. So it's hard to engage them when they feel like they're still doing the work. The economy has been a factor where people feel like they can't really afford to support at this level, or they're supporting multiple organizations already. In that, I would also include the recruitment challenges, the multiple sponsorship programs. So while this is great news for our country and for new immigrants coming here, that we have so many different pathways for people to arrive, it also can be confusing that there are multiple programs with different names and run through different ways. Can be confusing to potential sponsors, and it can take away some of our recruitment efforts when people know that they have a choice. The timing of arrivals at the beginning of the year was hard for the sponsors and hard for us to explain to them. Arrivals were slower, and while we explained the process to the groups, they were frustrated with our ability to have information, and there's nothing we can do. The information is relayed to us through our national resettlement office and then through international organizations. So it can be dispiriting to folks that are excited to have people arrive, and then it's delayed and delayed. So one way we've tried to change that is really to just be as transparent as possible and to almost set the expectation that this will happen at the beginning. So then if it doesn't, it's a great surprise, but really just explaining how the process of resettlement works to folks, so that we try to, not have as much surprise when it can be challenging or there's delays. The influx of Haitians has created challenges for us. We're really trying to shift the program focus to ask sponsors to consider supporting Haitians. We would love to see this happen. The difference would be when we first originally planned this program, it was, help families get on their feet to self-sufficiency. And with Haitians, not only Haitians, some other populations as well, they really need the support so much, but they may not be able to stay past a few years. And so trying to figure out how we're shifting that narrative to engage community members to support the Haitians that are here is something that we're still continuing to work on. And then fundraising, some groups were concerned about how to raise the money and soliciting friends. I think that's always a concern. So the way that we resolved that is we created a very streamlined process to ensure that it's the lightest lift that they could have. So we have templates for solicitation. We have thank you and social media templates. We have photos they can use that have been signed off on by clients. We created a system similar if you've ever done like a PanMass challenge that has a link that they can edit their own page and create a page talking about their group and why they're doing this. It goes to IINE, so it's tax deductible to them. And then it goes from us to the services that we're using it for that we are transparent about to them and giving them reports on how their money's being used, which is the money's being used almost entirely to cover, to support rent. But that has, I think, goes into our sales force. So we're able to clearly and easily tell them this person donated and this is when they donated and where you're at in terms of your goals. So that's been very helpful. And I think we've done a good job in that way. So our key takeaways after a year so it's a year from the planning phase. We've learned the following. So having the 3 months to plan is ideal. I know in working in nonprofits in the past, it's very unusual to be able to give this much time to plan a program. But we have figured that it takes about a year to build up this effective recruitment strategy. Um, I would recommend what we did, which is putting in as much structure to the design, program design as you can. Even if you don't use some of these things, having them there in case you do, instead of having to think it up in the moment, I think has been great. I was very happy with our financial planning that we were able to have all of these tools ready to go. Staff buy-in is essential. It requires ongoing communication. So if somebody's still not sure at the beginning, coming back and saying, did this work for you? Is there a way we could have done this better? And really continuing to gather their input. Transparencies with volunteers, which we've talked about. This is a new program. We told them over and over. We wanted their feedback. They wanted to be part of the design. They were excited to share, which was great. And I think helped with us when we weren't sure the answers to things because they knew what they were getting into. Continuing and learning, continue learning in collaboration with organizations who do this work in our states, in New Hampshire and Massachusetts, and across the country and in other countries is really essential. We're all doing this together and we're doing very similar work. So learning is great. Implementing a what's next plan. So this is something we just we're very excited about it. It sort of ends their sponsorship with a way to cultivate them into donors or long-term volunteers or spokespeople for IINE, or even train the trainers for our next groups. So instead of just ending and saying thank you and giving them maybe a photo book of their time with their family and with IINE and all the things that they've done, we're also saying, and here's a checklist of all the ways that you can continue to be involved. Instead of saying thank you and goodbye, it's really kind of taking them and moving them into the next step, which we're excited to see how that works. And then I'll just end with the goal of our project, which, we went over the 3 goals, but I think it's worth saying again that our project is really to strengthen community support of refugee resettlement in New England and really increase the capacity of the International Institute, but other resettlement agencies as well. We're concerned that without the support, we won't be able to continue resettling these numbers that we need to make our communities robust and diverse. So this is our goal for our program, and we're continued as we continue to scale it. And we're really excited that you came to listen. If you would like to learn more, you want to be in touch, if you know someone who wants to be a sponsor in Manchester or in other areas, please let me know. Otherwise, thank you very much.